ones that caused Gaddafi's death because Hillary Clinton played a game over there, and I was the one that went over there during the war. Gaddafi asked me to come over. I took a Biden staffer and a Bush staffer and a film crew leader from ABC One in New York, Larry Menti, with me, and a cameraman, because I didn't want the CIA to set me up. I hand carried the letter back from Gaddafi offering to resign. The U.S. didn't want him to resign. They wanted to kill him.
Why?
Because Gaddafi, and I met him 3 times. I took Biden on my second trip to Libya, by the way. He went with me when I spoke to the whole country. And every meeting I had with Gaddafi, he wanted 2 things. He wanted to unite the African continent into a group of nations economically, like European gold, like the European economy. He wanted to base it on the gold standard. And the U.S. and Europe didn't want that. And the other thing is they wanted control of his oil, and they wanted control of his sovereign wealth. So Gaddafi had to go. That's outrageous, and it's wrong. It's like Libya. We were the ones that...
All right, Shalom. Welcome to another video. And as always, before I get started, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rach, and next double honors to the head apostles / elder bishops of the great millstone who teach and who rule well, peace, blessings, and safety. To all you sincere Akim, keep pushing, keep believing, and keep the faith, regardless of whether people hear or whether they forbear. All right, so you've seen the clip, and this was sent to me by an elder, so the water for that. And this is a topic that I go into all the time because I love history. I love to study history. I'm not an expert, but I do know of a lot of the ill dealings that the West, when I say the West, I'm talking about the beast system, all right, which is NATO and the EU, and then America, which is the mystery Babylon, the woman that rides on top of the beast. I know of a lot of their ill dealings that they've done throughout the 4 corners of the earth, throughout the earth. Okay, and that's the reason why a lot of these different countries around the world are poor. All right, and it's always pretty much the same playbook, all right, which I've talked about at different camp lessons. All right, but I don't think I've actually ever made a lesson specifically on that topic. And this was a wonderful video that the elder sent me through the Spirit. All right, Elder Yakal out of Arkansas. So the water for that. Because once again, now it's not just a random guy on the street corner saying it. All right, it's one of their own whistleblowers that's saying it. But this is what they do. Okay, this is what they do. All right, the reason why a lot of these countries around the world are poor and are in third world status, so to speak, is what they call it, is because once the West, once Esau finds out that you have natural resources or that there's something that they can exploit to get wealthy off of, they're going to go into your country and quote unquote spread democracy. All that they're really doing is destabilizing the country, okay, so that they can pillage the resources. All right, what they'll do is whenever there's a good leader, they'll target him, they'll defame him, they'll demonize him in Western media so that they can justify being able to go in there and assassinate him and set up their own puppet leaders that will allow the pillaging of that nation, for the purpose of their own personal gain. Okay, so they'll be rich, and the rest of the country will plunge into poverty. All right, so that's one tactic that they use. All right, setting up faux, leaders. Okay, fake, leaders that they have handpicked. All right, to once again allow them to pillage the nation. That's one tactic that they use. Another tactic that they use is whenever they want something from a country and there is, like I said, a strong leader, a strong military, then what they'll do is they'll hire out and they'll fund rebel groups, okay, and they'll say, okay, a lot of times they'll fund rebel groups and they'll even say, oh, these rebel groups that we are funding are so-called terrorists, all right, like Al-Qaeda. Okay, or other different, especially in the so-called Middle East. A lot of these different, like Al-Qaeda is one, but there's others. I just can't think of ISIS. All right, that's another one. Okay, these groups they're funded by the West, and the reason why they do that, they'll fund these rebel groups and then label them as terrorists so that they can have excuse in the Western through the Western media to go into that nation, and then help whichever side will allow them to pillage the resources. They'll help that side and fight the other one to overcome them, and that will be what this does. Is it creates instability. Okay, it leads to civil war, and then the United States is able to go in there and look like the good guy when the whole time they were the ones who set all this up. All right, in the United States or other Western nations, they were the ones who set the whole thing up so that they could take all the resources from that country. Okay, and that's exactly what he said. He said that, Gaddafi, that they had a lot of gold. All right, and also what he was trying to do was very dangerous to the European powers. All right, because he was trying to unite all of Africa, okay, under a new currency similar to what Russia is doing right now with the BRICS, and use the gold standard, which that would essentially make their currency worth more than the Western currencies, because the Western currencies are not backed by the gold standard anymore. That's number one. But number two, all right, it wouldn't allow, it would unite Africa and wouldn't allow the nations to go in and pillage them, because even today, all right, a lot of these African countries are poor because of what? Because of colonization. Okay, not just from the Europeans, but also from Moab, all right, from the so-called Chinese. China has their hands all over Africa. Okay, and they're not going in there to, they'll tell you that they're going in there to industrialize, to modernize. No, they're going in there because they found something that they want, and they're going in there to take it. Okay, so this is talked of in the scriptures. All right, and we're going to dive right into that topic. And Jehovah Ruches, the Heavenly Father's will is edifying to the elect. All right, so this is Micah 2:1, and it's entitled, Woe to Oppressors. It says, Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. All right, so when the morning is light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. Why? Because the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Okay, pursuing to Job 9:24. All right, so they had the power to do so because the Most High has blessed Esau with the blessing of the sword. All right, verse 2. It says, And they covet field and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. All right, and see, this, really, that really applies to the northern kingdom over here. Okay, they saw what they call the new world. They call it the manifest destiny. All right, where they believe that it was their destiny to come over here and conquer, this land and to slaughter all of the inhabitants, which really, biblically, it was their destiny. Okay, that's how we know they're Esau, because Esau would be that conquering force in the last days. All right, the one that would be ruling at the second coming of Yahweh Shai, the one that he would, come back to personally take vengeance on. Okay, but this is their characteristics. All right, they covet fields, meaning they desire lands that don't belong to them. Okay, and what comes with that land? Resources. That's a part of it. And take them by violence. Okay, so as I said before, that's what they do. And when they see that there's resources, that's what the whole so-called war in the Middle East was all about. Okay, it's a banker's war. All right, where they weren't going over there to stabilize that part of the world. They couldn't give less of a damn what happens to those people over there. It was all about the oil. Okay, Bush. All right, they knew that those Ishmaelites, which are so-called Arabs, they had all that oil over there. So they planned, a way to demonize that area, the leaders of that area, and then be able to go in there and start up civil wars, coups, all right, so that they could pillage the resources. This is all part of them, once again, okay, coveting things and taking them by violence. Okay, and this Edomite, all right, he's open up about it, and the Lord is the one that's doing it. All right, he's the one that's causing them to spill out all their own secrets. This is Psalm 64:8. It says, So shall they make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Okay, so their own tongue is exposing these things. All right, whistleblowers. All right, they can't help it, man. Okay, it's the Spirit of the Lord that's doing it, exposing all these things on the left-hand side. But remember where you hear it first. All right, with the great millstone. Okay, telling you all these things that are going on behind the scenes and in the background. And you do have, astute so-called truthers out there that expose these things as well. But we're able to show you where, it's in the scriptures. Okay, that this is a spiritual thing. These are the characteristics of Esau, Edom. Okay, this is how they get down. This is how they operate. All right, let's get a little bit more, and I'm gonna close out. This is a short video, but I wanted to, show you a real life example of this. All right, because this is what they do. All right, first I'll go to Sirach 12, and let's see, Sirach chapter 12, and I'm gonna start at verse Sirach 12 and verse 10. It says, never trust thine enemy, for like as an iron rusteth, so is his wickedness. And though he humble himself and go crouching, yet take good heed and beware of him. And thou shalt be unto him as if thou hast wiped a looking glass. And thou shalt know that his rust have not been altogether wiped away. So no matter what, okay, even though he humbles himself, all right, because that's how he comes once again as if he with the savior complex, okay, as if he's coming in to actually make things better. The whole time he's plotting against you. All right, it says, set him not by thee, lest when he hath overthrown thee he stand up in thy place. Neither let him sit at thy right hand, lest he seek to take thy seat, and thou at the last remember my words and be pricked therewith. So he goes into these other countries, all right, and they thinking, okay, he's coming to help. We're going to do business with the so-called white man. The whole time, he's planning on how to destroy you. Okay, how to take whatever you have, your resources. Okay, and that's what he does. He takes. All right, and I'm gonna skip down. Sirach 12 and verse 15. Okay, it says, for a while he will abide with thee, but if thou begin to fall, he will not tarry. An enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he imagineth how to throw thee into a pit. Okay, so once again, they frame it on Western media as, the good old boys coming in to spread democracy, to let freedom reign from sea to shining sea. Whole time, all right, your country is completely destroyed because you have something there that they want. That's what happened. That's what happened in Venezuela. All right, many countries around the world, they made a movie about it, Blood Diamonds. If you ain't seen that movie, go and watch that movie. The main character, okay, is an arms dealer, and he's selling guns, or he's selling weapons to the and this is in Sierra Leone, this movie is based off a true story, by the way, or loosely based off a true story. Okay, the events of the movie that's happening are real life events that happened. Okay, civil war in Sierra Leone because they found diamonds. Okay, that's why the movie's called Blood Diamond. And what was happening was that the local population, all right, was being enslaved because of rebel groups that had risen up, that were funded and armed by the West, all right, for the purpose of taking the diamonds, okay, for the purpose of exploiting the natural resources of that country, which was diamonds, all right, and they were enslaving the local population and forcing them to work in the diamond mines. And the West, all right, they were going over there, they were arming the rebels, and then the rebels that got the diamonds, they would sell those diamonds to European nations, and they would end up at Kay's Jewelers, and eventually end up on some Edomites, ring finger. Okay, that's how it happened, man. And people were dying, losing their lives. There was civil war in the country. All right, why? Because of those diamonds that were there, and the West had a big part in that. And the main character in the movie, like I said, he was an arms dealer, and he was selling weapons to the rebel group and to the military, which were fighting against that rebel group. Okay, so they play both sides. This is what they do. All right, let's read it again. It says, Sirach 12 and 16, an enemy speaketh sweetly with his lips, but in his heart he imagineth how to throw thee into a pit. He will weep with his eyes, but if he find opportunity, he will not be satisfied with blood. If adversity come upon thee, all right, extreme poverty happens out of the blue, your economy collapses, civil war breaks out in your country, this is probably the reason why. Okay, you can best believe that somewhere along the line, before all these events transpired, that there's an Edomite, a bunch of Edomites coming in suits to come and talk to the locals. All right, if adversity come upon thee, thou shalt find him there first, and though he pretend to help thee, yet shall he undermine thee. Okay, there you go. And we'll get this last one. Go to Habakkuk 2. All right, so okay, the nations are starting to wake up and realize why all these things are happening. Why a lot of their countries are third world. Their countries have been pillaged. All right, it's not because the leaders are just stupid or there's no competent people, in those countries. It's because the West goes in there and they destroy those countries to make Babylon the Great rich. All right, and that's the reason why these nations, they come over here and try to get a piece of the pie, so to speak, because they realize that they know all the stuff that's being stolen out of their countries is coming over here to make Americans and other European nations fat. All right, this is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4. It says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, because Esau is very proud, but the just shall live by his faith. Okay, the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. They'll live by their faith. All right, that's all we got. Okay, it says, verse 5, yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. And listen to this. Listen close. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine. We broke that down plenty of times. The wine is talking about his philosophies, because when he comes, he doesn't come with just, with weaponry. All right, he doesn't come with funding just to destroy your country. He also destroys it from the inside out. Okay, because Esau will bring his philosophies and his mindset to your country. So now you have in the Middle East, so-called Middle East, which is really just Western Asia and Northern Africa, you have what? You have women out there, with this feminist nonsense, okay, going up against their men because they're learning that from TikTok and all these different social media platforms, okay, and they're watching these 304s over here in the West acting the way they act, okay. So once again, he transgresseth by wine. He is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. All right, so he's always in other countries, okay, pillaging, destroying their country from the inside out, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Okay, so he's, once again, he cannot be satisfied. His greed knows no bounds. They already have, all the riches and the wealth they could desire. They're still looking for ways to pillage nations that are less fortunate than they are. All right, let's read this in the NLT. It says, wealth is treacherous, and the arrogant are never at rest. They open their mouths as wide as the grave, and like death they are never satisfied. In their greed they have gathered up many nations and swallowed many peoples. See that? Okay, so that's what it is. In their greed have they gathered up many nations and swallowed many people. All right, their greed has destroyed, okay, countries from sea to shining sea. All right, continuing on though, let's read on. Habakkuk 2:6. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. So the nations are now taunting Esau. That's the reason why Russia, all right, with the BRICS thing, right? I read an article maybe about a week ago that over 55% of the world's population has agreed to join onto BRICS. So that means over half the world's population of different countries around the world are now pretty much siding with Russia. The reason why is because everybody knows who the big bad wolf is on the block. Okay, and now Russia is getting ready to rise up against the big bad wolf and take him down. Okay, and that big bad wolf being America and the West. All right, so the nations are taunting them. Okay, and it also says something key right here as well. It says, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Let's go into that. You go into that word, thick clay, Strong's H.
Strong's H, 5671, avteet.
And Salaki, I need to get better with my modern day Hebrew. I'm good with the Paleo Hebrew, but I can't read the modern day Hebrew, so I'm not able to translate how it sounds in the ancient language. But anyways, abteet, all right, and it says pawned goods, something pledged. All right, listen to this. It says a weight of pledges. That's because a pledge is when you say I'll pay you back. All right. In other words, what people know of as debt, heavy debts. That's a characteristic of Esau. That's how we know that America, all right, is Esau's main empire. Okay, because why? All right, America's under heavy debt. That was the main talking point, the debt ceiling, so to speak. What are they going to do about it? The debts keep rising. All right, this is a characteristic of Esau. How long, okay, will you build up your wealth from thievery, from robbery, and all these debts that you owe? All right. So let's read this also in NLT. Okay, it says, but soon their captives will taunt them. They will mock them, saying, what sorrow awaits you thieves? Now you get what you deserve. You've become rich by extortion. How much longer can this go on? See that? Okay, so that's what the nations are saying. How much longer can this go on? Look at this. NASB 20. Will not all these take up a song of ridicule against him, even a saying and insinuations against him, and say, woe to him that increases what is not his? For how long? And makes himself rich with debts. See? There you go. All right. Hey, man, these scriptures are cold. Habakkuk 2:7. Shall not they rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them? Okay, how is that going to happen? Through Russia. All right, all the nations are rising up under that guard spoken of in Ezekiel 38. Okay, Russia is a guard unto the nations. Okay, Magog. Okay, it's a guard unto all these different smaller nations that would not normally be able to stand up against the West, but now they're able to. Why? Because they have nuclear capabilities. All right, Russia is backing them. He say, if you attack Iran, you attacking Russia. All right, you attack, I'm just laying off examples. You attack, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, you attacking Russia. You attack North Korea, you attacking Russia. All right, you attack China, Russia jumping in on that too. All right, so they're rising up, and it says, verse 8 here, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, and of the city, and of all that dwell therein. It says, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house. You read about that in Micah 2. They covet things, they desire things that don't belong to them, that he may set his nest on high, and that he may be delivered from the power of evil. That's exactly what Esau has done. Okay, all in that he has made the rest of the world poor. All right, by going in there, coveting what they have, stealing from those nations, pillaging their resources to make himself rich, so that the Americans and people in the West can have a higher standard of living. And the nations see it and they're sick of it. Okay, it says in NLT, what sorrow awaits you who build big houses with money gained dishonestly? You believe your wealth will buy you security, putting your family's nest beyond the reach of danger. And that's exactly what Americans think. Americans don't ever believe that this place could be, attacked. Okay, but let's continue on. It says, verse 10, thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. Okay, that's exactly what Esau has done. Okay, he's built a town he's built Babylon the Great off of the bloodshed, okay, off the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, and from the pillaging of all the other nations around the world. It says, what sorrow awaits you who build cities with money gained through murder and corruption? That's the NLT. Fire. All right, we'll get this last one, verse Habakkuk 2 and verse 13. Listen to this. It says, behold, it is not of the Lord of hosts that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for their vanity, for very vanity. So the Lord is like, is it not, is it not of the Lord of hosts that the people, everything they're doing is going to be burnt up? Because the Lord, what did he promise them in Malachi 1? Even though, let's just get that right quick. All right, even though they build up, I will throw down. Okay, Malachi chapter 1 and verse, let's say get verse 2. Okay, it says, I start at 1. Malachi 1 and 1, the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, saith the Lord, yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith the Lord? Yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Verse 4. Okay, here's the point. And whereas Edom saith, Edom being a so-called white man, we are impoverished, where we will return and build the desolate places. They were impoverished, brought down low during what's known as the Dark Ages. Okay, and they were rebuilt, rebirthed through that Renaissance period. That's what that word Renaissance means. Okay, rebirth. It says, thus saith the Lord of hosts, they shall build, but I will throw down. And they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. So they built up all this, America, the rest of the European nations, and though they build, the Lord said, I will throw down, and they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom the Lord hath indignation forever. So he's always going to be pissed off at the Edomites. Okay, and that's why he's going to bring the mightiest destruction ever seen on the face of the earth to Babylon the Great, and it's only going to take 1 hour to do so. All right, now once again, let's read this once again, Habakkuk 2 and 13. We'll get this one in a different translation. All right, it says in the NLT, has not the Lord of heaven's armies promised that the wealth of nations will turn to ashes? They work so hard, but all in vain. Okay, you see that? NIV, has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire, that the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? Okay, because once again, he's going to burn he's going to destroy everything here. How's that going to happen? By nuclear fire. Okay, so it's all starting off right now. All right, everything that they've done around the world, which Gaddafi just being one example of that, okay, is all coming around full circle to bite them in the backside, okay, in their collective backsides. Because right now you have, as we speak, we have World War III brewing up, all right, with Russia being the main contender against America, Babylon the Great, and the West, and a host of nations right along with Russia. And we know exactly what's going to happen according to biblical prophecy. Okay, them stars gonna fall from the sky. They're gonna shoot the missiles off. All right, next thing you know, boom, 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 boom. In 1 hour, that's all it's gonna take. 1 hour for the Lord to completely destroy this place. All right, but that's it for the lesson. Talaki, it was a little bit longer than I expected. I was really just flowing in the spirit, wasn't unplanned. But you know, the Lord guided my mouth. So, the Wadi Habashim shot for that. I'm gonna close out. Yahweh Rutgers, I was edifying. As always, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachwadash. And until next time, Shalom, and abide Babal.